Okay, the kids were in the car and they were scared and crying and you started driving away. Francine, what were you doing? Where were you going?
Ran for my life. I ran for the life of my kids.
New voter ID laws.
Effort to purge voter rolls ahead of the 2024 election.
More threats to election workers.
Armed individuals showing up at polling locations.
Targeting voters of color, young people, people with disabilities.
We are not going to let them take from us what our grandparents and parents fought to give us in the first place.
What happened once you entered the dressing room?
He immediately shut the door and shoved me up against the wall and shoved me so hard my head banged.
نحن الآن قذيفة إسرائيلية في ذات المحيط خلال تسجيل هذا التقرير.
Hi, I'm Chuck Braverman. This is another episode of Westdoc Online. Today, as usual, we have a terrific filmmaker who is very different and very unique from the run-of-the-mill documentary filmmaker that you might think of from time to time, because today we have somebody who really came out of the feature film world and movies for television, which I think is very unique and unusual. Some doc filmmakers cross over from docs and do scripted occasionally and vice versa. But our filmmaker today is Robert Greenwald. Let's say hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm well, and thank you for having me on.
It really is an honor and a pleasure. And it's sort of stunning to look at your credits. Just before we even get into documentaries, you have 65 movies or miniseries or TV films that you either produced or directed or both, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
What were you thinking when you got out of this television scripted world? You were going to switch to documentaries and make a lot of money?
Actually, it was because I had been successful in commercial film and TV. And as I say, with a certain amount of humor and a certain amount of reality, I left the world of murderers, psychopaths, and backstabbers, commercial film and TV, and became a full-time, non-paid volunteer doing documentaries, which I've been doing for, 15 years now, and I've been able to do it both because I was overpaid when I did television movies and because I saved every penny I ever made.
And your company, I love the title of your company for reasons that should be obvious. Brave New Films is a company that Chuck Braverman would like. I think that's a great title for the film company.
Thank you. We got it online when we were looking for a name, and Jim Gilliam, there's only two of us doing Brave New Films at the time, and he suggested, why don't we ask people online? And I didn't really understand the way the internet and social media worked back then, and we got all these wonderful suggestions, and I don't remember who it was, but someone suggested Brave New Films, and we grabbed it.
What is your background getting into film in the first place? How did you start out?
Well, I started out being born, first in New York City. Then I spent a long time in the theater, both in New York, doing off-Broadway. Then I graduated to off-Broadway. Then I got hired to direct plays at the Mark Taper Forum, which had me moving to Los Angeles. And then after a couple of years of working at the Mark Taper Forum, I was hard hit by the reality. I have certain skills. One skill I don't have is being an employee and working for somebody else. So I either needed to start my own company or I would get fired. So with my partner, Frank von Zernick, we started our company. We called it Moonlight Productions because we were moonlighting from our job at the Mark Taper Forum, running around in his car, keeping our ideas and projects in the trunk of his car, and slowly working our way into a commercial television. We thought we would do features, but we had no money and no connections. And television movies, for all of its difficulties and challenges and limitations, it was much more egalitarian than commercial feature films. So we started creating and coming up with ideas for movies and television. Back then there were 90-minute movies for TV, and then there were 2 hours, and all 3 networks had movies for television on every night. I love reading. I love coming up with ideas. And so it was a very fertile and very productive opportunity.
Here's an unfair question, What's your favorite movie that you were involved with in the past before Brave New Films?
That's hard to say. I mean, the best known one was The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett.
School!
And that actually helped move me towards the nonprofit documentary world, but also the Abby Hoffman feature film I did, Steal This Movie, was another step in the direction of making documentaries and not trying to convince commercial gatekeepers that the movie I wanted to make was actually commercial, but being able to embrace fully the idea of documentaries, nonprofit, social justice work. So I would say those 2 films helped my transition towards this world of documentaries. And then possibly most importantly, as the tipping point, was the death of my father. And as I remember very well, sitting and thinking what I was going to say before I got up to speak at his memorial service, and I realized more fully than I had before that he had passed on to me this wonderful gift or message that, yes, you needed to earn a living so you and your family could survive, but you could also go beyond that if you were fortunate enough, and therefore focus on doing work that could help and impact and motivate other people. And that quickly became clear. It was documentaries, which I fell in love with the minute I started working on them.
And was there a period of time overlap between the documentaries and the TV movies where you would go back and forth? Or did you just go right into docs?
There was a slight overlap. I still remember my offices were a converted motel in Culver City, and
I remember.
Oh, there you go. Good. Wow. Good for you.
I was there. I can remember.
Yes. It was about maybe 100 years ago, but we were both young and had plenty of hair. So I started the movement towards documentaries, and there was one very small office that had an editing machine in it, and some friends of mine had come back from Florida, and they had shopping bags full of cassette tapes, and they said, could we borrow your editing machine? We want to make this documentary about the Florida election and how it was stolen, and we have these tapes. And I said yes, and then I would pop my head in and out as they were working, and of course make some suggestions to Rick Perez and Joan Seckler. And over time, the politics aside even for a moment, the creative possibilities of documentaries were so thrilling. You didn't have to beg a star to come out of a motorhome. You didn't have 90 people around waiting for you to make a decision. It was more intimate. It was more personal. You didn't have as millions and millions of dollars riding on how you did it. And you could do anything because you didn't have a script. So you could move material around. You could juxtapose one image against another. And I loved it from day one.
And how often, if ever, do you get the urge to go back to the 100-man crew and the 40-foot trucks and the multi-million-dollar budgets?
Almost never. Occasionally, I will miss working with actors. Last year, we did a short documentary with actors, and it was Donald Trump versus E. Jean Carroll. And the actors read from testimony that she had delivered in her trial, where she beat Donald Trump and won millions of dollars.
I thought for a minute I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. That's the sudden, horrible kind. But normally I would be cooking pasta or just going about my normal day. And in would slide just a picture of him going like this into the dressing room or hitting my head.
And working with the actors was pleasurable, enjoyable, but there are so many documentaries, ideas that I want to do. So the allure of the bigness is not as strong as the attraction, not just of telling these different stories. But I remember so clearly on one of the first documentaries I made after a screening, I've had films, people like them, they hate them, they're in between. But after this particular documentary, several people came up to me and they said, "Thank you for making this film." And that was almost addictive in the sense of extraordinary pleasure and meaningfulness and connection to an audience by making something that had a real impact and meaning for them. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to continue to do that since then.
Can you tell me about your latest film about Gaza?
What we do at Brave New Films is we put a face on policy. Many other think tanks and people who write books and study guides can do one part of it. But I try with putting a face on policy to reach people's hearts and then their brains, not starting with a position paper, but starting with the emotional connection. When I started thinking about doing something about Gaza, I knew it would be highly unpopular with some of our funders. I knew we would lose funding, which we did, as we did with our drones film, because it was critical of Obama. But I felt strongly that it was a very critical moral issue, and if I didn't do it, I would be cowardly. I felt it was a moral issue. And as a New York Jew, I felt a particularly strong ethical commitment to telling a story. Now, I also knew that you can't, for a documentary, it would have an audience of 0 if we only showed the horrific pictures over and over again of children being killed, of women being killed. So I searched around for an approach and a story which led me to the great work that various human rights organizations and journalist organizations have done. So I read literally thousands of pages of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and Committee for the Protection of Journalists and Reporters Without Borders, and I only became more committed to telling a story and telling it not to reach the hardcore people who sadly believe the only good Palestinian is a dead Palestinian, but reaching the larger audience of people who were not engaged in the issue, who looked away from the issue, and approaching it from the notion and the reality and the fact that depending on which study, somewhere between 175 and 210 journalists have been killed by Israel. And I felt that was something that could reach a larger audience, activate a larger audience, and move them to action. I started this 6 months ago, I think, emotionally and extraordinarily painful and difficult story to tell, and I focused on 3 journalists. And in the world of social media, and with an amazing team, Casey and Sean and Kiana at Brave New Films, they found footage, and then we edited the footage from social media accounts. So we were literally bringing these people alive from their social media, them, their families, their children, before they were killed. So I started connecting to the 3 journalists we focused on and using their stories, putting a face on policy, and bringing them alive in the way that film can do if the footage exists.
And tell us the title of the film and where will people be able to see this film?
We will, like with almost everything we do, May 28th will be the official release day. We have screenings set up through the amazing work of Sharif, who's been helping us set up screenings in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Israel, all of which are in the works. Then there'll be a Washington, D.C. premiere May 28th at Poets and Busboys. And then it will be available for anybody who wants to have a screening. And the key thing is still, even though this has been the hardest fundraising ever, it will be available for free. And you can do it by signing up at Brave New Films. You can do it on any one of the social media platforms for myself or Brave New Films. You sign up and you will get a link May 28th to have a screening.
You mentioned that you lost some of your funders when you were doing this film and some other films. Can you tell us who are your funders?
It's about a third. A third are the smaller donor funders from $5 to $500. There are a group of larger donors who give above $1,000 and more, and there are foundations. And it's roughly a third in each category. And with the Drones movie and with this movie, we lost some of the larger foundations and some of the larger funders, and some of the foundations have been less interested because of the fear, concern, maybe different ideology. But as the war has gone on, as the horrible killing has escalated, as starvation has been used as a tool, and as more and more organizations organizations like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and the United Nations are saying this is a war crime. As that has happened, there's been more and more pain, suffering, and interest in doing something about the issue. So we hope the film will be a tool here and all over the world. There's tremendous interest in other countries in using it to mobilize and activate and energize, but starting fundamentally with a human story. There's a lot of racism built into what's happening around Gaza and around Palestinians. And in humanizing our 3 journalists, one of whom is a woman, just breaks my heart even talking about it. She her 5-year-old daughter, her mother, and 50 plus relatives of theirs were all killed in one of the attacks. And the humanity of these people, I believe, will allow us to reach a larger audience and to engage them in what I think is an extraordinarily horrible moral crisis.
Have you been criticized by some of your own personal friends for making a film which is sympathetic to the Palestinians?
Yes.
Trying to put it in context of, how difficult this is for so many people, and especially Jews in the United States and elsewhere.
Yes, criticized by friends, by some relatives. But there's no doubt in my mind this is the right thing to do. And given a history of films around wars, starting with the Iraq War, when I literally got death threats, and then the Afghanistan War, when people were furious because it was critical of Obama, to this war and this is on not to compare, but on a moral level, this is extraordinarily horrible, given that it's ongoing and given that you see it every day, on any one of the social media approaches. There's people from Gaza, from war zones, young men, young women, children posting videos. And it will be hard for people to say they didn't know. But yes, the criticism from people close to me, not so close to me, has been strong, and it will get worse. I mean, it will get worse once the film is out, more widely available. Today, we just found out we got shut off out of TikTok for a while. Now they're not showing the trailer on TikTok. They don't give you a reason, but I'm assuming it was because the organized opposition to anything that criticizes the war has started to go after us.
Have you seen the Israeli film We Will Dance Again about the October 7th?
No, I've not.
Right.
Have you?
Yeah, I did an episode 161 at Westdoc, and interviewed the director and two of the senior American executive producers, who picked up the film here, Terry Wong and Susan Zirinsky, who was head of CBS News for a while, and she's one of the most senior CBS News people. And I'm not comparing apples to apples here. I'm just was curious. I mean, because this was, the event with video from both sides, from it was the kids that were there at the concert. Everyone had an iPhone. Everybody was filming everything, and the invaders, the killers that came in there and killed the 1,200 people, were all filming everything. And this Israeli producer got video and put it together, and it's very, very strong. It's on Paramount Plus. They're not running it on CBS, but they're running it on Paramount Plus. And so, I mean, not that what's happening in Gaza is correct, because certainly what's happening there is awful. What are you doing next, Robert?
We are going to spend a fair amount of time reaching as many people as possible, because this is an ongoing war. I think we'll be able to make some kind of difference. I think that because it's being videotaped, because it's being brought to us in real time on social media, there's more of a chance that the policy of Israel will be forced to change. So we're going to spend months, social media, screenings, worldwide, United States, providing it for groups. And then while we're doing that, hopefully we'll also be able to, dependent on some fundraising, be able to do some work on lining their pockets, which will be focus on the current administration and its corruption and greed and self-serving and self-dealing. Again, using film and media to tell that story in ways where people will understand. Corruption is not a victimless crime. It is coming from every taxpayer, every citizen, and into the pockets of a small group. And I also, again, subject to having some resources, be able to do something around immigration and deportation and the breaking of moral and legal rules as we are racing to kidnap and send people out of this country.
Well, I've been saying for a while that documentary filmmakers are the new journalists, because the journalists are certainly getting shut down left and right. And I just read today where WGBH let go 10 of their major production company people on their documentary unit. They're I don't know if downsizing is the right word. Do you worry about retaliation from the Trump government or people associated or pro-Trumpers in any way, shape, or form for some of the work? I mean, because you've been doing this for a long time, long before Trump was around.
Yes. I worry about many things because I'm neurotic and I'm from New York. I don't worry particularly about that, in that I feel every film that I've done of sort of the nature of going after a hot button, controversial, important issue, we've been attacked. The legal attacks have been minimal. Even the Koch brothers, they attacked, they called me names. Fox News, way back when.
What a great film. Yeah.
Thank you.
Outfoxed. I mean, I remember I don't know where I was. I saw it in the screening room and shocked about how you were able to use the video, so much video from Fox News to tell the story of
what was
going on.
I didn't know how fortunate I was, but Larry Lessig, the extraordinary lawyer and Harvard professor now, was an advisor around the notion I'd never even heard of, which was fair use. And my biggest battles before the film were with Larry. I kept saying, no, I've got to do that. And he said, you can do it, but then you're going to lose if they go after you legally. They never went after us legally. O'Reilly called me all kinds of names. But I think being attacked, criticized, the Iraq War, with, as I said, the death threats and other not so nice comments are part of what comes with this work. It's not fun, but when you're effective, you're going to be attacked, criticized. It hasn't yet, hopefully won't be physical in the attacks, but I take pride in taking on the issues that are important to take on. What's that line? Democracy is not a spectator sport. And so I don't want to be a spectator. And, the great Leonard Cohen quote, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light comes through. So I hope by bringing out the cracks, we'll be able to help let more light come in.
Thank you for being a guest on Westdoc. I admire your work. I'm so glad that you are there and doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was great.
social media has been justly criticized in many ways. We have found it to be very helpful in terms of reaching an audience. I remember going back, way back when Jim Gilliam was with us, and there were 3 of us, and he walked in, and we used to have to pay to get your material stored online, let alone seen. And he walked in one day and he said, you know, there's this new thing called YouTube. Maybe we could post a film there. And I said, what? And I went and looked at YouTube, and it was primarily cats playing the piano or naked women in the shower falling down. I said, Jim, you're out of your mind. He said, no, let's try it. So we put up a clip, I think it was from Iraq for Sale. 2 days later, he walks into my office, big smile, and he shows me the number where you could see how many views. And it was 7,190 views. And I was ecstatic because I'm thinking if there was 7,190 people in a room watching a film, I would be, beyond thrilled. That was our beginning of using social media. Today, and we're very small, we've had to cut back because of funding challenges, but Anna, our social media person, and the others put more time and effort into reaching people. So we're on every one of the platforms, which in and of itself doesn't sound so complicated, but Casey then figures out in post the ways to format, because YouTube, there's formatting, there's sizing, there's different lengths. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Instagram stories, and we're on all of those platforms. And our fundamental audience, which, by the way, anybody who wants to see anything and all of our stuff, just go on to one of the platforms. We reach over 1 million people regularly.